Discovered my wife was lying to everyone about our toxic home life after she hit our son, smashed my computer, and accused me of being unstable. Since December 2009, everything began to unravel between my wife and our children. She didn't remember having them or choosing to become a mother. More than once, she told me she felt like she was simply babysitting someone else's kids, and that she didn't want to be a mother anymore. It was utterly heartbreaking to watch her disconnect from them so completely. Our 9-year-old son started having some trouble at school. He was getting picked on, and we didn't realize what was going on until his behavior at home became noticeably worse. On top of all that, we caught him sneaking cookies to his room. My wife reacted by cracking down, hard. She saw his vulnerability as weakness and decided he needed stricter discipline. I disagreed but tried to keep us moving forward, hoping we could work through this. Our son was confused. One of the boys picking on him had been a good friend, and every time he tried to explain what happened, he'd contradict himself, increasing her fury. She thought he was lying and acting out for attention, so she nailed him for every misstep. The punishments were relentless. I'd come home from work to find him in tears, lugging all his toys to the basement as punishment for some minor thing I can't even remember anymore. He'd be lectured for something as trivial as bringing home a dirty lunch bag or a muddy coat. Sometimes, if he just looked at her the wrong way, she'd start yelling. Every time I tried to step in an object, we'd end up in an argument. She always blamed me, saying I contributed to his attitude. Now, he started lying whenever he sensed trouble, even though he wasn't much good at it. I wanted to find out why he was lying, to deal with the fear beneath it, so we could tackle it together and build trust. She took it personally and just wanted to punish him even more. Our son is bright but socially awkward, probably a little immature for his age. Her constant berating only made him shut down, stonewalling in self-defense. Against my objections, she'd threaten him with beatings, withholding food, or making him sleep in the basement if he wouldn't answer her. It escalated to name-calling, seething sarcasm, and outright belittling. I tried to shield him, but any time I intervened, my wife made me pay for it. Attempting to calm her down only brought her rage onto me. Trying to talk to her privately after the kids went to bed inevitably turned into a fight. I was so confused. She had never, ever treated anyone like this before. Filled with anger and regret about quitting her job to raise the kids as well as the lack of opportunities to go back, she resented being stuck at home. She felt that, after giving up so much, with her health issues, the kids owed her perfect behavior. But they're just kids. She complained more and more about how unfair her life had become, how she didn't deserve any of this, especially not ungrateful, bratty children. I've always tried to be the kind of parent the books recommend, patient, understanding, firm but fair. Discipline should be about boundaries and cause and effect, not humiliation or anger. But affection and attention from their mother dwindled to practically nothing, especially for our son. The kids started actively avoiding her, coming only to me for what they needed. They began speaking in hushed tones, hoping to fly below her radar, which just angered her further. She accused me of being the weak parent who coddled them, insisting that changing her approach would only show them weakness wins. Every disagreement circled back to blaming me. Arguments got more heated, her name-calling turned crueler. I started seeing how manipulative she'd become. She'd guilt-trip our son, claiming his horrible behavior was the reason she stayed sick. She attacked him, not his actions, insisting he confess to being awful. During one exchange about this, she struck me in the face as I tried to sit down. I hadn't moved toward her or shown a hint of anger, and I'd never laid a hand on her, ever. I was stunned beyond words. She never apologized, she never does. Instead, she justified it, saying I needed to be snapped out of my upset. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't make myself give up on my marriage. I kept telling myself she was sick, overwhelmed, bottled up with stress. I made every excuse for her. Almost as if she read my mind, she taunted me for being too gutless to leave, told me I'd never get the kids if I tried. She said I was the real problem, responsible for her anger, her illness, and for ruining her life. She knew every button to push, every bit of guilt to dredge up. I was always exhausted, my resolve draining. I took on more and more, handling breakfast and lunches the night before, dinner after work, laundry, tasks I used to share with her. She told our son, flatly, that he'd no longer get anything from her. That, if I wasn't around, he might as well starve. She might vacuum occasionally, but otherwise she planted herself on the couch, watching TV, playing on her phone, shopping online. It got to the point where I felt like a single father, aside from her yelling. We slipped into silent stretches where we didn't speak at all, and honestly, I started to welcome these respites. The kids and I could actually breathe. We'd talk, read, play, as my wife locked herself away. But it never lasted. When she and I reconciled, the time between arguments shrank, while the periods of silence grew longer and longer. Still, I refused to give up hope. I believed I could help her see how toxic this path really was, how much pain her anger was causing everyone. All I received for my efforts was more blame, more accusations. If I got upset at her words, she accused me of being unstable and overly sensitive. If I reacted to her calling me a closet faggot, her word, not mine, a puss, a worthless father, an embarrassment, if I so much as flinched, I became the uncaring husband unmoved by his poor, suffering, sick wife. She called our 9-year-old son a worthless piece of shit, an ass, a horrible son, lazy, selfish, you name it. She told him that he was such a terrible kid, it was no wonder he didn't have any friends. I always stepped in, but every time I did, I paid for it. Afterward, I'd give him a hug and a kiss before bed, still in tears, and tell him that, yes, he always needed to work on his behavior but that I would always love him, and nothing he did could change that. Thankfully, I had to do that far less with our 5-year-old daughter, but she still wasn't immune to that kind of treatment. I started to notice both kids withdrawing into themselves more and more, but my wife insisted it was all my fault. Everything finally came to a head today. For the past week, my wife hadn't spoken to me or the kids except for the occasional snide remark. I'd been sleeping on the couch, trying to soak up every spare moment with my kids. That Thursday morning, I was at work when she called, and right away she said my son was going to get his ass beat when he got home. I asked what he'd done, and she shot back, he was running down the sidewalk with some other kids instead of waiting at the bus stop like he was told. I asked if there was anything else and she snapped that she'd already told him not to move from the bus stop and that he needed to learn to do what he was told. She raged about not being legally responsible for a kid who won't listen to her. I told her I had a meeting I'd be late to and that I'd call her later. She was furious and texted me a few minutes later, calling me a worthless father and telling me not to call. Later, after a dentist appointment, I got another text. Why the hell didn't I respond? I texted back and asked what was going on. She told me my loss. I was nearby, so I decided to skip my errands and head straight home. The house was empty. She had taken my daughter out for some errands, but my son was due home any second. She didn't come back for another 45 minutes, and major storms had been hitting for days. If I hadn't come home early, he would have been stuck outside alone. She finally burst in and instantly started yelling at him. I told her I'd already handled it, but she spun on me, screaming about my lack of parenting. I said if she was going to yell, I wouldn't stand there and take it, that we could talk later. She started shouting that I was a big fucking puss, right in front of our son. I put my hands up in surrender, backed away, turned, and started to walk off. Then I heard her hit our son. He burst into tears. From where they were and how he was holding his face, I could tell she'd hit him in the face. I yelled at her to stop, to get her hands off him. She ran past me, grabbed the phone, and said she was going to call my mom and tell her how fucked in the head I was and how I contributed to our son's behavior by refusing to discipline him. Then she threatened to call the police. I stood there stunned, telling her that was insane. She'd just hit our son, not me. I could hear my boy crying hysterically in the next room. I told my wife that I was going to check on him, that she needed to put the damn phone down, and that if anybody was calling the police, it would be me. As I turned away, I heard a massive crash behind me. My wife had taken my brand new 27 inches iMac and smashed it against the ground, shattering the glass and display. She stormed upstairs while I stood there, dumbfounded. I rushed into the other room to check on my son. His face was still red, but other than being scared and shaking, he was okay. I calmed him as best I could, then went to look for my wife. She had locked herself in our bedroom and was talking to my mom, lying that she was afraid for her safety and that I'd chased her and forced her to lock herself in. That's when it sank in, our marriage was over, and I had to focus on protecting the kids. She ignored my request to open the door and kept trying to provoke me by spinning her story. I gathered myself, went back to my son, and checked on him. He was rattled, so I talked with him for a while, assured him that I would never leave him, and promised that the hitting, yelling, and name-calling would stop for good. My wife eventually marched back downstairs with her cell and offered me the phone, suggesting I could talk to my mother if I'd calmed down enough. I was stunned by how she staged herself as the frail, sick wife being hounded by an angry husband. She had never shown behavior like this before. She used to be the most honest person I knew. I told my mom what really happened, and over the next hour, finally came clean about what had been going on in our home for the past year or so. We live about 6 hours away from my parents, and they'd suspected something was up. We hadn't visited in ages, and my wife has no relationship with her own family. I was still trying to figure out if I should call the police over her smacking our son and destroying my computer. I was, and am, in such a fog I can barely think straight. I made it clear to my mom that, no matter what, the marriage was over. She recommended that I call a lawyer in the morning before taking any big steps. After finally telling my mom the truth, I realized just how bad things had gotten. I try not to drown in guilt for not doing something sooner, or for not doing more to protect my kids. But now, my wife has said she's changed her mind and won't move out until I get a psych evaluation. My biggest fear is that she's going to try and paint me as the angry, unstable husband to take my daughter away. I keep telling myself it's not likely. The kids openly say they're scared of her, but I have this nagging doubt, and I've heard too many horror stories about dads losing their kids. My son, in his own words, recounted the night she hit me. He'd gotten out of bed and pressed his ear to the HVAC vent, heard the whole thing, even my repeated stunned reaction. I can't believe you hit me. I know I'm far from the perfect dad or husband, but I try every day to improve and not quit on anyone. I am still reeling that I am sitting here, knowing I'll soon be an almost middle-aged single father raising, hopefully, 2 kids on my own. I truly believe divorce wouldn't happen to me. I thought divorce was for other people who didn't try hard enough. But now, I know my wife needs help, and I can't let her hurt our kids anymore. I have to get this off my chest because I have no one else. I feel lost, but I know what I must do next. It's almost 1 a.m. right now, but my mind is spinning, so I'm planning to play a bit of Portal 2 to clear my head before I crash on the couch. I'm desperate for advice. How am I supposed to cope with all this? How can I help my kids through what's bound to be an ugly divorce, and what can I do to protect myself and make sure I get full custody? This has all spiraled because my wife started telling everyone that I was the one with problems. She told my family doctor that I was acting like a maniac and scaring her and the kids, which couldn't be further from the truth. She even said she would leave with our kids. I told her flat out that if she tried that, I'd call the police. Now she's gone one step further, sending emails and texts to my parents and even a coworker, calling me bipolar, schizo, just a total mess. I felt I had to prove I wasn't hiding anything, so this morning I went straight to the doctor for an evaluation, bringing both kids along. I was terrified my wife would bolt with them if I left them home. My son was in tears about missing school. He told me he didn't want to stay home with her, but almost in the same breath, he said he wanted to stay away from me, because his mom told him I was sick. I tried to explain that I was fine. Just tired and shaken up after everything that went down yesterday, and upset over my lost work and the computer she smashed. He was more concerned about that than any of the yelling or hitting. He couldn't believe how furious she'd gotten to do something like that. When we got to the doctor's office, the nurse took the kids to another room so I could speak openly. The doctor told me she thinks I'm borderline depressed given everything I've been handling, but her bigger concern is for the family as a whole. She actually discouraged me from escalating legally or putting the police in the middle, afraid it could escalate things for the kids' sake. But my number one concern is the kids' well-being. I told her, things really started going downhill when my wife began having seizures over a year ago. I don't know if it's the stress, or the anti-seizure meds messing things up, but she was never like this before. The doctor wants my wife to come in and get checked out, but that's a dead end. She flatly refuses to admit she's done anything wrong. To her, I'm the cause of all our problems, or maybe the kids are, anyone but her. I reached out to my boss in HR for help. They've been incredible. HR even gave me her cell number and a list of psychologists and social workers who could help, and I'm taking FMLA leave just to regroup. When I got back home, my wife actually came to talk to me, almost like she was shocked that the doctor didn't have me placed on a psychiatric hold. I told her what the doctor said, about being borderline depressed and wanting to see her in for an evaluation, but she barely listened. She swung right back to accusing me of being the problem, not her. I just don't see any way forward for us as a couple after this, not when she truly believes nothing is wrong with her behavior. And then the most bizarre thing happened. That morning, her personality flipped completely. She wrapped our son in a big hug, the first time I've seen her show physical affection in nearly 2 years. She was even warm and encouraging when he shared his drawing at the table, telling him how wonderful it was, instead of the usual snide remarks about him wasting time. My son is totally baffled by this sudden shift. He can't understand why she's suddenly acting nice. I don't know what's coming next. But tomorrow, I'm starting by making some phone calls and getting a lawyer. My kids are confused, I'm exhausted and more anxious than ever, and it feels like I'm battling for our lives. Update 1. I thought things couldn't get worse. I was wrong. The lawyer meeting went about as well as expected. He took notes, asked tough questions, and basically told me what I already knew: document everything, don't engage with her provocations, and prepare for a fight. He seemed confident about custody given the kids' clear preference to stay with me, but warned that her sudden personality flip could be her trying to establish a pattern of good behavior before court. That lasted exactly 4 days. Last Tuesday, I came home from work to find my wife's car gone and both kids at the neighbors. Apparently, she dropped them off for a playdate around 2 p.m. and never came back. When I called her, she said she was taking some time to think and would be back later. She didn't come home until almost midnight, reeking of alcohol and wearing clothes I'd never seen before. When I asked where she'd been, she just smiled and said I wouldn't understand because I was too boring to get it. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. But here's where it gets really twisted. My son came to me yesterday morning while she was in the shower. He was holding his tablet, looking confused and scared. He'd been playing a game when a text notification popped up on her iPad. They're linked to the same Apple ID. The message preview was enough to make my stomach drop. Last night was incredible. When can we do it again? I took screenshots before the message disappeared. There were others. Lots of others. Going back weeks. My wife has been having an affair. The guy's name is Marcus, and from what I can piece together from the messages, he's someone she met at physical therapy for her back issues. The conversations are explicit. But worse than that, she's been talking about me and the kids. Calling us dead weight and the reason she can't be happy. She told him I was probably gay anyway and that the kids were accidents she regrets every day. Reading those messages felt like being punched in the gut repeatedly. But there was something else. She'd been planning to leave. Not just emotionally checking out, but actually planning to disappear. She'd been saving money in a separate account, telling him about how she was going to get out of this prison soon. I called my lawyer immediately. He said the affair could definitely help with custody, especially if she abandons the family. But then he asked something that made my blood run cold. Are you sure she's planning to leave? Or is she planning something else? That night, I couldn't sleep. Something felt off. She'd been too calm, too confident when she came back from her thinking time. Around 3 a.m., I decided to check her phone. She'd left it charging on the kitchen counter, something she never does. What I found made me sick. She wasn't just planning to leave. She was planning to take the kids and claim I was abusive. The text thread with Marcus was full of her rehearsing stories about me hitting her and threatening the children. He was encouraging her, telling her how to document evidence and even suggesting she should provoke him into doing something stupid. But the worst part? She'd been recording our arguments. Not the parts where she screamed and hit me, just my responses. My voice, out of context, asking her to stop yelling at the kids or telling her I wouldn't tolerate her hitting my son. Without the context, some of it could sound threatening. I took pictures of everything and sent them to my lawyer at 4 a.m. The next morning, she was back to her sweet act with the kids. Making pancakes, helping with homework, even suggesting we have a family movie night. My son looked at me with such confusion. This woman who'd been terrorizing him for months was suddenly acting like mother of the year. I played along, but inside I was screaming. How long had she been planning this? How long had she been using our children as pawns while sneaking around with another man? That evening, after the kids went to bed, I confronted her. I didn't mention the messages. My lawyer said to keep that as ammunition. I just asked her directly if she was seeing someone else. Her reaction was chilling. She didn't deny it. She didn't get angry. She just looked at me with this cold smile and said, "What if I am? What are you going to do about it, puss?" Then she leaned in close and whispered, "You have no idea what's coming. I'm writing this from a hotel room. My lawyer got an emergency hearing, and tomorrow a judge will decide on temporary custody. The kids are with me. I picked them up from school today and told them we were having an adventure. They're scared but trying to be brave. My wife has been calling and texting nonstop. The messages started sweet, 'Where are my babies?' and 'Please come home,' but quickly turned vicious. She's threatening to call the police, to tell everyone I kidnapped the kids, to ruin me at work, but I have those screenshots. I have proof of her affair, her plans to frame me, her abandonment of the children. My lawyer says we have a strong case. I just never imagined it would come to this. The woman I married, the mother of my children, has turned into someone I don't recognize. Someone capable of destroying her own family for a man she's known for a few months. My son asked me tonight if mommy still loves us. I didn't know what to say. How do you tell a 9-year-old that his mother is willing to destroy his life for her own selfish desires? Tomorrow will determine everything. I'm terrified, but I know I'm doing the right thing. My kids deserve better than being pawns in their mother's sick game. I just pray the judge can see through whatever performance she's planning to put on. Update 2. The emergency hearing was a nightmare, but not in the way I expected. My wife showed up looking like the perfect suburban mom, conservative dress, minimal makeup, even brought a folder of evidence that made my stomach turn. Pictures of me looking exhausted and disheveled, taken without my knowledge during our worst fights, printed screenshots of my angry texts, completely out of context, and even a doctor's note about her injuries from our altercations. Injuries I never caused. But the worst part? She brought Marcus, not inside the courtroom. He waited in the hallway like some kind of moral support. When I saw him, everything clicked. Tall, clean-cut, wearing scrubs. This wasn't some random guy from physical therapy. This was her physical therapist. The same one I'd been paying for through our insurance for the past 8 months. My lawyer had warned me she'd put on a performance, but I wasn't prepared for the complete character assassination that followed. She painted herself as a victim of domestic abuse, claiming I'd been increasingly unstable and violent since her medical issues began. She even had tears on command, telling the judge how afraid she was for her children's safety. When my lawyer presented the affair evidence, she didn't even flinch. Her attorney, and when the hell did she get a lawyer, claimed the messages were taken out of context and that she'd been seeking emotional support during an abusive marriage. The recordings of our arguments? She spun those as evidence of my threatening behavior and her fear for her safety. The judge granted temporary joint custody. Joint custody. After everything she's done, after abandoning the kids, after planning to frame me, she gets to take my children every other week. The look of smug satisfaction on her face when the judge made the ruling will haunt me forever. But here's where it gets worse. Last Friday was her first custody weekend. She picked up the kids with Marcus waiting in the car. Apparently they're not even hiding it anymore. My son looked back at me through the rear window as they drove away, and I could see the fear in his eyes. Sunday night, she was 2 hours late bringing them back. When she finally showed up, both kids were quiet. Too quiet. My daughter, who normally talks my ear off about her weekend adventures, barely said hello. My son went straight to his room. It wasn't until bath time that I noticed the marks on my daughter's arm. Small, circular bruises near her wrist. When I asked her about them, she looked scared like my son used to and whispered, "Mommy's friend said I can't tell you about weekend games." I felt terrified. I took pictures, called my lawyer, and spent the night documenting everything I could get the kids to tell me about the games Marcus plays with them and how mommy gets very angry when they ask to call me, how they have to be very quiet when Marcus is sleeping over. My lawyer filed an emergency motion Monday morning, but the system moves so slowly. The kids have to go back to her again this Friday, and I feel like I'm sending them into hell. But yesterday, something unexpected happened. I got a call from a woman named Sarah. She'd seen the court records, apparently they're public, and wanted to talk. Turns out, she's Marcus's ex-wife, and she has some very interesting things to tell me about my wife's new boyfriend. She's coming over tonight after the kids go to bed. She says she has evidence that could change everything about the custody situation. She wouldn't say more over the phone, just that she's been waiting for someone to finally see through his act. I'm trying not to get my hopes up, but for the first time in months, I feel like maybe I'm not fighting this battle alone. Maybe there's still a way to protect my children from whatever sick game my wife and her lover are playing. The hardest part is pretending everything is normal for the kids. Making dinner, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, all while knowing that in 3 days, I have to hand them over to people who I'm becoming convinced are dangerous. My son asked me again last night if mommy still loves him. This time I told him the truth. I don't know, buddy, but I love you enough for both of us. I just hope it's enough to get us through this. Update 3. Sarah came over Tuesday night, and what she told me changed everything I thought I knew about this situation. She's not just Marcus's ex-wife, she's his victim. And apparently, my wife isn't his first married woman with children. Sarah brought a thick folder of documents, police reports, medical records, court filings. Marcus has a pattern. He targets women going through medical issues, poses as their supportive physical therapist, then systematically isolates them from their families. The affair is just the beginning. He did the same thing to me, Sarah said, her hands shaking as she showed me photos of bruises on her own children. Started with the wife, then moved on to the kids. He calls it family restructuring. The bruises on my daughter's arm? Sarah recognized them immediately. Compliance marks, she called them. He pinches them when they don't follow his rules. Hard enough to hurt, light enough that it looks accidental. But here's the thing that made my blood freeze. Marcus isn't just some perverted opportunist. He's methodical. Sarah showed me a notebook he'd left behind, pages of observations about her children's routines, fears, behavioral triggers. He'd been studying them like lab rats. He told me once that broken families were easier to rebuild correctly. Sarah said, "Your wife isn't calling the shots anymore. He is." She gave me copies of everything, police reports from his previous victims, documentation of his methods, even recordings of him coaching her to lie to authorities. Apparently, he'd made the mistake of trying to get Sarah to record their conversations for therapy purposes after their divorce. Instead, she'd been building a case against him for 2 years. The other families were too scared to come forward, she explained. But when I saw your wife's name on the court documents as his new project, I knew I had to act. I called my lawyer immediately. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Thursday. Wednesday night, I made a decision that probably saved my children's lives. I drove to my wife's apartment. Yes, she moved in with Marcus after 1 week of dating, to pick up some of the kids' things they'd left behind. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I had a key she didn't know I'd kept. The apartment was empty, but I could hear voices coming from the basement. I crept downstairs and found something that still makes me sick to think about. Marcus had set up what he called a family training room. Charts on the walls showing behavior modification schedules for my children. A punishment corner with restraints. And video equipment. Lots of video equipment. I took pictures of everything, but that's when I heard them coming back. I barely made it out the back door before they pulled into the driveway. But I'd seen enough. Sarah was right, this wasn't just about an affair or custody games. This was something much darker. Thursday's emergency hearing was completely different from the first one. My lawyer presented Sarah's evidence, my photos, and a statement from a child psychologist about the compliance marks on my daughter. My wife's lawyer tried to dismiss it all as a desperate attempt by a jealous ex-husband, but when the judge asked my wife directly about Marcus's notebook and the basement room, she couldn't answer. She just sat there, staring at her hands. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not the fake fear she'd been performing, real terror. Like she was finally realizing what she'd gotten herself into. The judge suspended her visitation immediately and ordered a full investigation. Child Services is now involved, and Marcus is being investigated by the police in 3 different counties. But here's the twist I never saw coming. When the police went to arrest Marcus Thursday evening, he was gone. Completely vanished. His apartment cleaned out, his car missing, even his physical therapy license had been surrendered that morning. And he took my wife with him. She's been missing for 4 days now. Her phone goes straight to voicemail, her bank accounts haven't been touched, and her parents haven't heard from her. It's like she just evaporated. The police think Marcus realized the investigation was closing in and decided to run. Whether my wife went willingly or otherwise, they can't say. My kids don't know their mother is missing. I've told them she's getting help and that they'll be staying with me for a while. My son seems relieved, but my daughter keeps asking when mommy is coming home. I don't know what to tell her. Part of me hopes my wife is safe somewhere, coming to her senses about what she's done. But another part of me, a part I'm ashamed to admit exists, hopes she never comes back at all. The kids are in therapy now, and slowly starting to open up about what happened during their weekend games. It's worse than I imagined, but the therapist says they'll recover. Kids are resilient, she tells me. I'm trying to believe her. Sarah has become an unexpected ally through all of this. She's been helping me understand Marcus's methods, preparing me for what might come next. Because men like him don't just disappear forever. They resurface somewhere else, with someone new. He'll contact your wife eventually, she warned me. When he does, she'll either realize what a monster he is and come running back, or... She didn't finish that sentence, she didn't need to. For now, my children are safe. We're in counseling, I'm back at work with understanding supervisors, and we're slowly rebuilding our lives. But I keep looking over my shoulder, wondering when and where Marcus will surface again. And whether my wife will be with him when he does.